It almost feels like the story for the Houston Texans the past couple of years has been playoff caliber, borderline Super Bowl caliber defense, borderline XFL caliber quarterbacks. I'm just saying. The Brian Hoyer experience did not end well for them, especially in the playoffs. Then last offseason, the big move, they go give Brock Osweiler a shit ton of money to come in and stink up the joint. Just a general thought for organizations in the future, as we found out later on. If you're going to invest potentially big money in a quarterback, you might want to make sure, A, that your head coach actually likes him, B, your head coach envisions him being a fit in your system, and C, that maybe your head coach has actually met him before you've signed him to the big contract. I'm just saying. It got bad with Osweiler, and they felt like it was no hope with him in Houston. That a year after giving him that big contract, they traded him away and a second-round pick just to get rid of him to the Cleveland Browns. Just think about that. And the Houston Texans are a perfect example of you've got a team with a top-notch, high-level defense. And in 2016, they were great, and they didn't even have arguably the best defensive player in the National Football League in J.J. Watt. I mean, that's just insane to think about. But you look at them. They brought in Lamar Miller last year in free agency, and he was solid. You've got DeAndre Hopkins on the outside, who has shown flashes of being able to be a stud, but he needs a quarterback that can actually get him the damn football. Then you look at the defensive side of the ball. You've got what I feel is like as good of a pass rush trio in the National Football League as there is. You can almost call them the power company or something. J.J. Watt, Whitney Merciless, and Jadeveon Clowney. You look at one of the positives of last season, even with the lost year for J.J. Watt, was the emergence of Jadeveon Clowney into being somewhat of the player that was envisioned a couple of years ago when this team spent the number 1 overall pick on him. And what's crazy about it to think about, Clowney's development finally in his third year in 2016 was able to stay healthy somewhat, and he was really productive. I thought they utilized him better. I liked how they utilized him better, and he played really well. Is that with all things being equal and everybody there, Clowney's still only the third best pass rusher they have. Watt is better, and Merciless is better as an edge rusher. Clowney's their third best edge rusher. That pass rush has some otherworldly potential, and it will be interesting to see if all three of these guys can stay on the field healthy together this year for any extended period of time, because if they can, man, it could be nightmares for opposing quarterbacks, especially knowing with a Watt, a Clowney, a Merciless, you might only have to bring 4, and you can consistently get to the other team's quarterback, disrupt their timing, their rhythm, limit what they can do to stretch the ball vertically down the field. You help out your secondary. They can gamble, take more chances. Just all of these things. That pass rush is a Super Bowl caliber pass rush. And it helps you to be able to do so many things. But ultimately, the problem is for the Houston Texans, and you say it for other teams too, but it's most striking for the Houston Texans. The one thing they've never had is a franchise quarterback. They had a period of time with Schaub where he was a good starter, but he was never great, and he most certainly wasn't a true franchise guy. He was enough to get him to a certain level, and that was it. They've never had, in the previous 15 years of their existence, a franchise guy. Sure, they drafted somebody like Carr, and David Carr totally busted out in the league for a plethora of reasons. They've just never had that guy. And I can understand totally why the Houston Texans traded up in the first round of the 2017 draft to go get Deshaun Watson. This seemed like a clear indication of Bill O'Brien liked the kid, Bill O'Brien felt like the kid fit his system, and Bill O'Brien had actually met the kid. 3 indications that that might be a good path to go down, because ultimately it didn't matter if the Texans stayed put where they were and drafted for depth and everything else. If you thought this kid was your quarterback and you thought he was that guy that can do that, you must go get him. Because if you don't have a quarterback, you have nothing. And with this defense, the Houston Texans clearly show you just how much of a difference a quality quarterback can make when you have him versus when you don't. This is a team that can make it to the playoffs, but has no visions, patterns, or designs of advancing because their quarterback play come playoff time absolutely sucks and in general is not good whatsoever. And when you look at the biggest thing for this organization to figure out in 2017, it's very simple. When will Deshaun Watson take over the reins as the starting quarterback? Because you can say, well, Savage has been better than him in the preseason, perhaps. But how long can you really go to your team and say Tom Savage is the best option we have? He's the best choice that we have. He's the guy that's going to give us the best chance to win throughout the entirety of the season. I don't buy it. You traded up to get this kid Watson. You obviously felt like he had something special. Even though I didn't have that high of a grade on him and I have some concerns about him at the NFL level, the point is the quicker you find out about Deshaun Watson, the better. And you are in a situation in Houston where your defense is very, very good, so it can help relax your young quarterback a little bit. With a guy like Lamar Miller, you can run the ball at least a little bit, so it takes some of the pressure off of him. You have some talent in the passing game, most notably a DeAndre Hopkins. You've got last year's first-round pick, Will Fuller. Maybe Braxton Miller can come in and do something. Jalen Strong, if he stays away from the stickiest of the ickies, once he gets off of his suspension. So you've got some talent on the outside. It's not a horrible situation for a kid like a Deshaun Watson to come in. And to me, that's what it all comes down to this season, is long-term, the quicker that Deshaun Watson can get in the lineup as the starting quarterback, the better chance this Houston Texans team has to do something. And it's that simple. I mean, you could ask Tom Savage to game manage you, and you might still be able to win the division. You might still be able to make the playoffs, and that is perhaps true, and that might be still what happens in 2017. But there will be absolutely no upside past that. There will be absolutely no chance in hell that this team has any visions of realistically competing for a Super Bowl. And while I'm not saying that a Deshaun Watson would be able to do that as a rookie in 2017, he might be able to do that in 2018, 2019, or beyond. And long term, the better option is Deshaun Watson. And that's where they've got to go. Defensively, one kid I'm wanting to watch is Kevin Johnson, because I look at him and I say, okay, is he going to step up? Now you got A.J. Boye out. Is he going to show that he can be that type of guy as a corner? It remains to be seen. In terms of their schedule, I look at weeks 4 to 6 because it's a stretch where they've got 3 straight home games they really need to clean up with Tennessee, Kansas City, and Cleveland. All 3 of those games are potentially winnable because they match up well with all 3 of these teams and are clearly better than at least the Cleveland Browns. When I looked at the Texans at first, I will be honest, I had them finishing second in the division to the Titans. I had the Titans winning the AFC South and the Texans kind of being in the wild card mix. But considering what's happened in Houston, and my heart goes out to the poor people in Houston dealing with Hurricane Harvey, to me it seems like it's a blessing in disguise for the Texans organization. It's one of those things that can get the players caught up in the emotions. It can create this kind of ambiance of an environment that we're doing it for not just ourselves, but we're doing it for a greater good, a bigger cause. We're going to be that point of hope, that point of potential, that point of promise, that point of success, something for everybody in that community to latch onto. And I think that makes a difference. Call me crazy, but I remember back in 2006, after 2005 and the disaster that season was for the New Orleans Saints, they're having to play games at different places, and it was just bad. But I remember 2006 came along, and you brought in Drew Brees, you drafted Reggie Bush, and here's Sean Payton, and all of a sudden, you're in the NFC Championship game. And I look at the Houston Texans, and to me, they've got a borderline Super Bowl caliber defense. You've got some other pieces in place. You get that young kid, Watson, in there early on, and you get everybody bought in and believing in him, and people getting caught up in the emotion of, well, we got to do it for the city. We got to do it for the city. It could potentially be something that ruins the organization this year because it's too much of a distraction. But I think Bill O'Brien is solid enough as a coach to be able to keep the team reined in, keep them focused, keep them driven towards a common goal. And I think it's something that will make the difference for them this year, as crazy as that sounds. So I've got the Houston Texans, just like I had the Titans finishing 10-6, but because of tiebreakers, I've got the Houston Texans winning the AFC South for what would this be now, the third year in a row? And it's kind of crazy. They've kind of dominated the AFC South over the past couple of years, and I think they went 9-7 both times. This time I'm giving them 10 wins. I don't know how much they would do come playoff time, mind you, but that would be still a positive season, especially if you make the playoffs with Deshaun Watson starting most of the games, and that's what matters here. The quicker Deshaun Watson is ready to start, the quicker he does start, and the quicker he shows you some flashes of something, leaves your organization in a much better place for the future.